Okay, the third type of quadratic expressions that we'll factor, it's again of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. More technically, it's of the form negative ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, what makes this problem different than the other one is that we have a leading coefficient whose sign is negative. Now, the best way to approach this here is to factor out the negative. And so when we actually go ahead and we try and factor problems that are of this form here, what we want to do is we always want to factor out that leading negative. Or in other words, it would look something like this. So negative and then a x squared, change the sign of bx minus bx, and then change the sign of c. Okay? And as you'll notice, if we distribute the negative, we'll get negative ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay? So, in other words, we just factor out the negative. Okay? So just keep that in mind. We'll be factoring out that negative. So here we go. So let's take a look at problems like this here. Let's say here I started. Here's an example. I started with negative x squared plus x plus 6. Okay, again, the leading coefficient is negative. So we want to factor out that negative. Make it a little easier for us. Okay, in fact, it makes it a lot easier for us. And so this will equal then, I'll factor out that negative, and then x squared, change the sign of everything else, minus x, minus 6. Okay, so now this problem just becomes a traditional factoring trinomial problem. So we want to find factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 1. Okay, so we have a couple of possibilities. We have negative 1 and 6. We have 1 and negative 6. That still doesn't add up to negative 1. We have 2 and minus 3. Alright, so that does it. 2 and negative 3 then. 2 and negative 3 will add up to negative 1. And so when we go to factor this, again, remember we have to write our negative first though, but then we write the product of two binomials. Okay, so that negative there is that negative there. And then we just factor, as usual, the x squared minus x minus 6. So again, so we have our x and our x here, and then we have a positive 2 right there, and a negative 3 right there. Okay, and you can FOIL and you'll see we would get what we started with here. So we'll just try that. So a negative, so now I'm going to factor or FOIL. X times x is x squared. That's the first term. Outside term, x times negative 3 is minus 3x. Inside term, 2 times x is 2x. And then 2 times a negative 3 is a negative 6. So this will give me x squared minus x minus 6. And then when I distribute that negative, I'll get negative x squared plus x plus 6, which is what we started with if you go back up here to the beginning. So negative x squared plus x plus 6, negative x squared plus x plus 6. Okay, so just one more of those. Again, it's the same. We take the same approach as we did with type 1 problems, factoring trinomials, but we first factor out the negative. Right, and so the last problem would be this here. So I have a negative x squared. Let me just clear that up a little bit. Negative x squared minus 13x minus 36. So again, I'll factor out the negative. So negative. So this would be x squared plus 13x plus 36. So again, I have to find factors of 36, which add up to 13 here. At 13. So I'll list all the factors of 36. There's a lot of them. 1 and 36. And then it's 2 and 18. 3 and 12. Still doesn't add up to 13. 4 and 9. There we go. Okay, so 4 and 9 adds up to 13. Now, again, if you recall, the sign here is positive, and there's two ways we can get a positive when we multiply a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative. And I knew it was positive because that term there told me so, or both of those numbers here were positive. So here we go. So when we factor this, then we can keep our negative. So there's my minus. And then we factor as the product of two binomials, x and x, and then positive 4, positive 9. Okay? And if you FOIL multiply, you'll find you get back to where we started. So again, we're just factoring out the negative first. So the problems you have where you have to factor out the negative on page 331 is 10 through 12. So as you do those problems, review this video and it should help.